It's about becoming powerful enough to keep your promises to yourself. And by the end of this journey, you may never see discipline or yourself the same way again. What if the biggest obstacle standing between you and the life you want is not the world, but your own decisions? Every dream you've ever had has demanded one thing that motivation alone can never provide: discipline. The ability to act when you don't feel like acting. The strength to continue when excitement disappears. The courage to choose your future over your comfort. Because success isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built in ordinary moments that most people ignore. Every early morning, every difficult decision, every repeated action. This audiobook is not about becoming perfect. Like, share, subscribe now. The hidden power of self-discipline. Imagine waking up tomorrow with complete confidence that you will do exactly what you promised yourself you would. Not because you feel motivated, not because someone is watching, not because you're afraid of failure, but because you have developed something far more powerful than temporary inspiration. You have developed self-discipline. For most people, discipline feels like punishment. The word itself often creates images of restriction, suffering, sacrifice, and endless hard work. Yet this understanding misses one of the most important truths about human success. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is freedom. The freedom to choose your future instead of being controlled by your impulses. The freedom to pursue long-term goals instead of short-term comfort. The freedom to become the person you know you can become. Consider for a moment how many decisions shape your life every single day. You decide whether to wake up when the alarm rings. You decide whether to exercise or stay comfortable. You decide whether to work on your goals or postpone them till tomorrow. You decide whether to spend money impulsively or invest in your future. Most people believe that major life outcomes come from major decisions, but in reality, life is built from thousands of tiny decisions repeated over years. A single workout changes very little. A single healthy meal changes very little. A single productive day changes very little. But repeated hundreds and thousands of times, these small decisions become the architecture of an entire life. This is the hidden power of self-discipline. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives waiting for motivation. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel inspired. They wait to feel confident. And while they wait, time quietly continues moving forward. The disciplined person understands a different truth. Action creates motivation. Action creates confidence. Action creates momentum. The question is not whether you feel ready. The question is whether you are willing to begin. And that single decision may change everything. Chapter 2. Understanding the Mind. Why we do what we do. Before you can master your behavior, you must first understand the system that creates it. This may sound obvious, but most people spend their entire lives fighting against themselves without ever asking a simple question. Why do I keep doing things I know I shouldn't do? Why do we procrastinate when we know we should start? Why do we abandon goals that genuinely matter to us? Why do we choose comfort over growth, even when we understand the consequences? The answer is not that you are lazy. The answer is not that you lack intelligence. And the answer is certainly not that you are incapable of change. The truth is much more interesting. Your brain was never designed to make you successful. It was designed to keep you alive. For thousands of years, human survival depended on conserving energy, avoiding danger, seeking immediate rewards, and staying within familiar environments. Our ancestors did not survive because they constantly challenged themselves and pursued ambitious long-term goals.
They survived because they were cautious, efficient, and highly responsive to immediate needs. Today, however, we live in a world that rewards an entirely different set of behaviors. We are expected to delay gratification. We are expected to focus for long periods. We are expected to exercise when we feel tired, save money when we want to spend it, study when entertainment is available, and continue working toward goals that may not produce results for months or even years. In many ways, self-discipline is the process of teaching an ancient brain how to succeed in a modern world. And once you understand this, something remarkable happens. You stop seeing yourself as your enemy. Instead, you begin to understand the hidden forces shaping your decisions. Imagine that your mind contains two competing systems. The first system is emotional, automatic, and immediate. This system asks, what feels good right now? The second system is rational, thoughtful, and future-oriented. This system asks, what will benefit me later? Every day of your life, these two systems are constantly negotiating with each other. When your alarm clock rings at 5 in the morning, one system says, stay in bed, you're tired. The other says, you promised yourself you would wake up. When you sit down to study, one system whispers, check your phone for a minute. The other reminds you, you have important goals. When you're trying to eat healthier, one system sees immediate pleasure. The other sees long-term health. Self-discipline is not about eliminating the emotional system. That would be impossible. Self-discipline is about strengthening your ability to listen to the wiser voice, even when the louder voice is demanding immediate satisfaction. Unfortunately, our modern environment is designed to amplify that louder voice. Consider how many opportunities for instant gratification surround you every day. Unlimited entertainment, instant communication, fast food, social media, endless notifications, immediate purchases. Every one of these experiences activates a powerful reward system inside your brain. This reward system is driven by a chemical messenger called dopamine. Many people misunderstand dopamine. They believe dopamine creates happiness. But dopamine's primary role is something else. It creates anticipation. It motivates pursuit. It encourages repetition. In simple terms, dopamine teaches your brain what behaviors should be repeated in the future. This system was incredibly useful for our ancestors. Finding food produced rewards. Building social relationships produced rewards. Exploring new environments produced rewards. But modern technology has discovered how to stimulate these same reward pathways continuously. Every notification, every short video, every refreshing feed, every small digital reward. Each one creates a tiny burst of anticipation, a tiny promise that something interesting, exciting, or pleasurable is about to happen. The problem isn't that these experiences exist. The problem is that your brain gradually becomes trained to expect immediate rewards. And when that happens, activities that require delayed gratification begin to feel unusually difficult. Reading a book becomes harder. Studying becomes harder. Exercising becomes harder. Building a business becomes harder, not because you've become weaker, but because your reward system has become accustomed to receiving immediate stimulation. Understanding this changes everything, because if behavior can be trained, then behavior can also be retrained. This is where habits enter the story. Every habit follows a simple pattern. First, there is a cue. Something triggers your brain to begin a behavior. Then comes the routine, the action itself. Finally, there is a reward, the experience that teaches your brain whether the behavior should be repeated. Imagine walking into your kitchen after a stressful day. The stress is the cue. Eating unhealthy food becomes the routine. Temporary comfort becomes the reward. Repeat this process enough times, and eventually your brain creates an automatic pathway. The behavior no longer requires conscious thought. It becomes part of your identity. The fascinating part is that positive habits work exactly the same way. A morning alarm becomes the cue. Exercise becomes the routine. A feeling of accomplishment becomes the reward. Repeat this cycle often enough, and discipline begins to feel less like effort and more like identity. This is one of the greatest secrets of self-discipline. Highly disciplined people are not constantly fighting themselves. They have simply built systems that make the right actions more automatic. Consider someone who exercises every day. You might imagine that they possess extraordinary willpower, but often what they possess is something far more valuable. They possess a routine. They don't negotiate with themselves every morning. They don't ask how motivated they feel. They simply execute a pattern that has been repeated hundreds of times. This understanding leads us to a powerful realization. You do not rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your systems. If your environment encourages distraction, you will struggle. If your environment encourages discipline, you will improve. If your routines support your goals, progress becomes inevitable. If your routines sabotage your goals, frustration becomes inevitable. The question then becomes, how do we redesign our lives to support the person we want to become? The answer begins with awareness. Observe yourself. Notice your patterns. Notice what triggers distraction. Notice what creates momentum. Notice which environments strengthen your discipline and which environments weaken it. Do this without judgment. Do not criticize yourself. Do not label yourself as lazy or weak. Become a scientist studying your own behavior, because every moment of awareness creates an opportunity for change, and every opportunity for change creates the possibility of transformation. The greatest mistake people make is believing that discipline is about forcing themselves to become someone else. In reality, discipline is about discovering how your mind already works and then learning to work with it instead of against it. Once you understand the system, you can begin to change the system, and that is where true transformation begins. In the next chapter, we will explore perhaps the most powerful concept in all personal development: why lasting change does not begin with goals, it begins with identity.
Chapter 3. Building your identity. Becoming the person you want to be. There is a question that quietly shapes every decision you make, every habit you build, and every goal you pursue. Most people never ask it, yet it determines the direction of their entire lives. The question is this: who do you believe you are? Not who you wish you were, not who other people think you are, not who you pretend to be on your best days. Who do you believe you truly are when nobody is watching? Because whether you realize it or not, your identity acts like an invisible force that guides your behavior. If you believe you are an unhealthy person, you will eventually return to unhealthy habits. If you believe you are lazy, you will interpret every challenge through that identity. If you believe you are incapable of change, every failure becomes proof that you were right all along. But if you believe that you are becoming disciplined, resilient, and capable, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your actions start aligning with your identity. This is one of the most powerful principles of human psychology. People fight to remain consistent with the story they tell themselves about who they are. Imagine two individuals trying to quit a harmful habit. One person says, "I'm trying to quit." The other says, "I don't do that anymore." The difference seems small, but psychologically, it changes everything. The first person is fighting against their identity. The second person has already begun creating a new one. For years, many experts believed that success began with setting goals. Set a goal, create a plan, work hard, achieve the result. And while goals are important, there is a problem with relying on goals alone. Goals focus on outcomes. Identity focuses on becoming. Suppose your goal is to write a book. You can force yourself to write for a few weeks, but if you never begin to see yourself as a writer, your effort becomes a constant battle. Now, imagine a different approach. Instead of saying, "I want to write a book," you say, "I am becoming someone who writes every day." The objective is no longer the book. The objective is becoming the type of person who naturally produces books. This shift changes everything, because outcomes are temporary. Identity is permanent. Think about your own life. How many times have you promised yourself that this time would be different? How many Monday mornings began with enthusiasm and ended with disappointment? How many times did you set ambitious goals only to slowly drift back into old patterns?
Perhaps the problem was never your motivation. Perhaps the problem was that you attempted to change your behavior without changing your identity. Imagine trying to become physically fit while constantly telling yourself, "I've never been athletic." Imagine trying to become financially responsible while believing, "I'm just bad with money." Imagine trying to become disciplined while secretly believing, "I don't have enough willpower." These beliefs act like invisible anchors. No matter how hard you try to move forward, they pull you back. The human brain values consistency more than improvement. It would rather remain familiar than become extraordinary. That is why personal transformation often feels uncomfortable. You are not simply changing your habits, you are challenging your identity. And identity is deeply emotional. Think back to your childhood. How many labels did you receive? Maybe someone called you shy. Maybe someone called you lazy. Maybe someone told you that you weren't smart enough. Perhaps you failed at something important and quietly decided that failure was simply part of who you were. Over time, these experiences can become stories, and eventually, stories become identities. The tragedy is that many people spend decades living according to stories that were written during moments of weakness, fear, or misunderstanding. But here's the truth. You are not your past behavior. You are not your worst mistake. You are not the labels that others placed upon you. Identity is not discovered. Identity is created every single day through repeated actions. Imagine a sculptor standing before a massive block of stone. The sculpture does not appear instantly. Each strike of the chisel removes a small piece, day after day, week after week, month after month. Eventually, what once looked impossible becomes obvious. Personal growth works exactly the same way. Every disciplined action becomes evidence. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes evidence. Every difficult decision becomes evidence. And your brain pays attention to evidence. Suppose you decide to wake up early tomorrow. When you succeed, you have earned 1 vote for becoming a disciplined person. Suppose you exercise even when you don't feel motivated. Another vote. Suppose you choose focused work over distraction. Another vote. One action doesn't transform your identity, but thousands of actions eventually make your identity impossible to deny. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Many people attempt radical change. They wake up one day determined to completely reinvent their lives. They create impossible schedules. They make unrealistic promises. They attempt to become a different person overnight. But identity transformation rarely happens through dramatic moments. It happens through repeated evidence. A single workout doesn't create an athlete. A single book doesn't create a scholar.
A single productive day doesn't create a disciplined person, but repeated consistently over time, these actions build a new identity. And once identity changes, behavior follows naturally. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't debate whether you should do it. You don't wait for motivation. You don't negotiate with yourself. Why? Because brushing your teeth is part of who you are. It has become part of your identity. Now imagine if exercise felt like that. Imagine if reading felt like that. Imagine if discipline itself became part of who you were. That is the ultimate goal. Not forcing behavior, becoming the type of person for whom the behavior feels natural. Of course, this raises an important question. How exactly do you build a new identity? The process begins with a decision. Not a decision about what you want, a decision about who you want to become. Ask yourself, who is the strongest version of me? What does that person believe? How do they spend their mornings? How do they respond to discomfort? How do they handle failure? How do they treat their commitments? Then ask an even more important question. What would that person do today? Not next year, not next month, today. Because identity is not built through imagination alone. It is built through action. A person who wants to become disciplined must practice discipline. A person who wants to become courageous must practice courage. A person who wants to become successful must practice success habits. The action comes first, the identity follows. This creates a fascinating paradox. You don't wait to become confident before acting confidently. You act confidently until confidence becomes your identity. You don't wait to become disciplined before practicing discipline. You practice discipline until discipline becomes your identity. This process requires patience, perhaps more patience than most people expect, because identity changes slowly, sometimes painfully slowly. There will be days when you feel like you're making no progress, days when old habits return, days when you question whether transformation is even possible. During those moments, remember this. A single failure does not erase 1,000 successes. A single mistake does not destroy a new identity. You are not trying to become perfect. You are collecting evidence. Every time you return after failure, you strengthen your identity. Every time you refuse to quit, you strengthen your identity. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you strengthen your identity. Eventually, there comes a moment when something remarkable happens. You stop saying, "I want to become disciplined." Instead, you begin saying, "I am a disciplined person." You stop saying, "I hope I can succeed." Instead, you say, "I am someone who finds a way." This shift changes your life because your actions no longer require constant motivation. They become expressions of who you believe you are. And when identity and action finally align, transformation stops feeling impossible. It starts feeling inevitable. But even after building a stronger identity, one powerful enemy remains. An enemy that has stolen more dreams, destroyed more goals, and delayed more success than perhaps any other force in human history. Its name is procrastination. And in our next chapter, we will discover why we procrastinate, why it feels so powerful, and how to defeat it once and for all.
Chapter 4. Defeating Procrastination, Winning the War Against Delay. There is an invisible thief that has stolen more dreams than failure ever could. It doesn't arrive with violence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't force its way into your life. Instead, it whispers. It says, "Not today. Tomorrow will be better. You'll feel more motivated later. You have plenty of time." And because its voice sounds reasonable, intelligent, and harmless, we listen. That thief is procrastination. Almost everyone has experienced it. The student who delays studying until the night before an exam, the entrepreneur who postpones launching a business, the writer who waits for inspiration, the athlete who promises to start training next week, the person who delays changing their life because they believe there will always be another opportunity. At first, procrastination feels comfortable. In fact, that's precisely why it's so dangerous. It offers immediate relief. You avoid discomfort. You escape pressure. You postpone uncertainty. And for a brief moment, everything feels easier. But there is always a price. Because procrastination doesn't eliminate discomfort. It transfers it. The stress you avoid today becomes greater tomorrow. The task you postpone today becomes more difficult tomorrow. The opportunity you ignore today may disappear tomorrow. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is this. Most people don't lose their dreams because they fail. They lose them because they delay. Think about how many times you've said, "I'll start next Monday. I'll begin next month. I'll wait until the timing is perfect." But when exactly does perfect timing arrive? For most people, it never does, because procrastination is not fundamentally a time management problem. It's an emotional management problem. This is one of the most important truths you'll ever learn. People rarely procrastinate because they are lazy. They procrastinate because they want to avoid uncomfortable emotions. Fear, uncertainty, self-doubt, embarrassment, overwhelm, failure. Imagine you're about to begin a difficult project. Logically, you know you should start, but emotionally, the task feels uncomfortable. Your brain immediately searches for relief. Suddenly, checking your phone seems urgent. Cleaning your desk seems important. Watching one video feels harmless. The goal isn't productivity anymore. The goal becomes escaping discomfort. This explains why highly intelligent people procrastinate. It explains why hard-working people procrastinate. It explains why motivated people procrastinate. Because procrastination is not a character flaw. It's a coping mechanism. The problem is that it's an ineffective one. Imagine you receive a letter that contains important but stressful information. Instead of opening it, you place it in a drawer. For a few moments, you feel relief, but the letter still exists. The problem still exists. And now you've added anxiety to the original challenge. This is exactly how procrastination works. Every delayed decision creates two burdens, the original task and the emotional weight of avoiding it. Over time, this emotional weight becomes exhausting. You begin feeling guilty, ashamed, frustrated, disappointed in yourself. You start questioning your own abilities.
You wonder why everyone else seems capable while you continue struggling. But here's the truth. Your problem isn't that you're incapable. Your problem is that you've been fighting the wrong battle. You believed the battle was against laziness. The real battle is against avoidance. Let's explore why avoidance is so powerful. Human beings are wired to seek certainty. Our brains prefer familiar discomfort over unfamiliar opportunity. Think about it. A difficult job may make someone miserable for years, yet they remain because leaving creates uncertainty. A person may stay trapped in unhealthy habits because change feels unpredictable. Someone may postpone pursuing their dreams because trying creates the possibility of failure. Ironically, people often choose guaranteed dissatisfaction over uncertain growth. Because uncertainty feels dangerous. Our brains interpret uncertainty as risk, and risk activates fear. This explains why procrastination often increases when something truly matters. If a task is insignificant, there's little emotional resistance. But if a task could change your future, if success would transform your life, if failure would hurt your self-image, suddenly procrastination becomes extremely attractive, because delaying allows you to temporarily avoid emotional risk. This is why some of the most ambitious people struggle with procrastination. Their goals matter deeply, and the more something matters, the more vulnerable we feel. Understanding this changes how we approach the problem. Instead of asking, "How can I stop being lazy?" we begin asking, "What emotion am I trying to avoid?" That question changes everything. Suppose you're avoiding studying. Are you avoiding boredom, fear of failure, fear of discovering that you're unprepared? Suppose you're delaying a business project. Are you avoiding uncertainty, fear of criticism, fear of rejection? Suppose you're avoiding difficult conversations. Are you avoiding discomfort, conflict, vulnerability? Once you identify the emotion, the problem becomes manageable, because emotions are temporary. Avoidance is permanent. Now let's discuss one of the most effective methods ever discovered for defeating procrastination. It's remarkably simple. Reduce the size of the task. Most people attempt to motivate themselves by focusing on the entire journey, write the entire book, lose all the weight, build the entire business, master the entire skill. Your brain sees the enormous challenge and immediately experiences overwhelm. Then procrastination begins. But what happens if you shrink the task? Instead of writing a book, write one paragraph. Instead of exercising for an hour, exercise for 5 minutes. Instead of cleaning the entire house, clean one room. Instead of studying for 3 hours, study for 3 minutes. Something fascinating happens. The emotional resistance decreases. Starting becomes easier, and once you start, momentum often takes over. This principle is so powerful because action creates clarity. You do not think your way into action, you act your way into clarity. Many people wait until they feel motivated. Successful people understand something different. Motivation often arrives after action begins. Imagine pushing a massive boulder. At first, it barely moves. The effort feels overwhelming, but eventually momentum develops. The same principle applies to productivity. Starting is usually the hardest part. Continuing becomes easier. This is why some of the world's highest performers rely on systems rather than emotions. They don't ask, "Do I feel like working?" They ask, "What is the next action?" The next action, not the entire project, not the entire future, just the next step. This mindset eliminates overwhelm, because overwhelm is often caused by trying to carry the entire journey at once. No one climbs a mountain in a single step. No one builds a career in a single decision. No one transforms their life in a single day. Everything meaningful is accomplished one action at a time. There is another hidden cause of procrastination that few people discuss: perfectionism.
Many people delay because they want everything to be perfect. The perfect plan, the perfect opportunity, the perfect conditions, the perfect version of themselves. But perfectionism is often fear wearing a disguise, because if everything must be perfect before you begin, you never have to risk failure. You never have to face criticism. You never have to confront reality. Perfection becomes a protective mechanism. Unfortunately, it also becomes a prison. Consider every successful person you've ever admired. Did they begin perfectly? Of course not. Their first attempts were imperfect. Their early efforts were flawed. Their initial results were disappointing. But they started anyway. And because they started, they improved. This leads to another important truth. Action creates confidence. Waiting destroys confidence. Every time you avoid action, you reinforce fear. Every time you take action, you weaken fear. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action.
Confidence is the reward for action. Think back to a moment when you did something difficult. Perhaps you gave a speech, started a new job, learned a skill, overcame a challenge. Before you acted, you probably felt fear. After you acted, you felt stronger, not because the fear disappeared, but because you proved that you could act despite the fear. That is courage, and courage is one of the greatest antidotes to procrastination. There is also a deeper reason why overcoming procrastination matters. It's not simply about productivity, it's about self-trust. Every promise you make to yourself creates an opportunity. When you keep that promise, you strengthen your trust. When you break it repeatedly, you weaken your trust. Eventually, many people stop believing themselves. They promise to wake up early. They don't. They promise to exercise. They don't. They promise to pursue their dreams. They don't. After enough broken promises, they begin to believe that they are incapable of change. But this belief is false. The problem was never capability. The problem was consistency. Fortunately, self-trust can be rebuilt, not through grand promises, but through small victories. Promise yourself 1 minute of work, then do it. Promise yourself 1 page, then read it. Promise yourself 1 action, then complete it. Each completed promise becomes evidence, evidence that you can rely on yourself, evidence that your future is not determined by your past, evidence that change is possible. And eventually, these small acts of integrity accumulate. They become confidence. They become identity. They become discipline. Perhaps the greatest lesson about procrastination is this: you do not need to feel ready. You do not need to feel motivated. You do not need to eliminate fear. You simply need to act while those feelings exist. Because courage is not the absence of fear. Discipline is not the absence of resistance. Success is not the absence of difficulty. They are the decision to move forward anyway. 1 action, 1 choice, 1 moment at a time. And when you finally learn to take action before you feel ready, you discover a truth that changes everything. The life you want is not waiting for a future version of you. It is waiting for the version of you who decides to begin today. But beginning is only the first step. The next challenge is creating behaviors that last. Because temporary effort can produce temporary results, only habits can produce permanent transformation. And that is where our journey takes us next.
Chapter 5. Building Powerful Habits. Creating Automatic Success. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that every positive action you wanted to take required almost no effort. You wake up on time without negotiating with yourself. You exercise without forcing yourself. You begin your work without procrastinating. You make healthy choices without internal conflict. You save money without feeling deprived. You pursue your goals without relying on motivation. For many people, this sounds impossible. After all, aren't success and discipline supposed to require constant struggle? Surprisingly, no. At least not in the way most people imagine. What they often possess is something much more powerful. They possess systems. They possess habits, and habits are among the most powerful forces in human life. Consider your average day. How many decisions do you consciously make? At first glance, it may seem like hundreds, but psychologists have discovered something remarkable. A large percentage of our daily behavior is automatic. We wake up in similar ways. We brush our teeth in similar ways. We travel familiar routes. We respond to situations using established patterns. Much of our life operates on autopilot. This is neither good nor bad. It's simply how the human brain conserves energy. Imagine if every morning you had to consciously relearn how to walk, speak, or drive. Your brain would become overwhelmed almost immediately. Habits exist because the brain seeks efficiency. When a behavior is repeated enough times, the brain creates a shortcut.
Eventually, the behavior no longer requires substantial mental effort. This is why habits are so powerful. They reduce the need for constant decision-making. And every decision you eliminate preserves mental energy for more important tasks. Think about someone who exercises every morning. When they first began, each workout probably required effort. There were internal debates, excuses, resistance. But after months or years of repetition, exercise became automatic. Not easy, but automatic. This distinction matters. Successful people don't necessarily experience less discomfort. They experience less decision fatigue. They don't repeatedly ask themselves whether they should do something. The decision was made long ago. Their habits simply execute the decision. Imagine driving down a road you've traveled hundreds of times. You no longer think about every turn. You no longer consciously analyze every intersection. Your brain has learned the route. Habits function in much the same way. They transform effortful behavior into familiar behavior. This creates a fascinating possibility. If bad habits can become automatic, then good habits can become automatic too. But first, we must understand why habits exist. Every habit follows a predictable cycle: a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. Let's explore each one. The cue is the trigger. It tells your brain to begin a behavior. The smell of coffee, the sound of your alarm, walking into your kitchen, receiving a notification. The cue creates awareness. Then comes the craving. The craving is not necessarily for the behavior itself. It is for the feeling associated with the behavior. You don't crave social media. You crave stimulation. You don't crave junk food. You crave pleasure or comfort. You don't crave procrastination. You crave relief from discomfort. Next comes the response. This is the behavior itself: opening the app, eating the snack, avoiding the task, or perhaps exercising, reading, or working. Finally comes the reward. The reward teaches your brain whether the behavior is worth remembering. If the reward feels valuable, your brain stores the pattern. Repeat this process enough times and a habit is born. This explains why breaking bad habits feels difficult. You're not simply changing behavior, you're disrupting a neurological pattern. Imagine a path through a forest. The first time someone walks through it, progress is difficult. The vegetation is thick, the route is unclear.
But each time they walk the same path, it becomes easier. Eventually, a trail appears. Your brain functions similarly. Every repeated behavior strengthens a neurological pathway. The more often you repeat an action, the easier it becomes. This is both encouraging and terrifying. It's encouraging because positive behaviors become easier with repetition. It's terrifying because negative behaviors do too. Think about the habits that currently shape your life. How many were intentionally designed? Probably very few. Most habits develop accidentally. You check your phone because it was nearby. You snack because food was visible. You procrastinate because distraction was available. Your environment often determines your behavior more than your intentions. This realization changes everything. Most people attempt to change themselves through motivation, but motivation fluctuates. Environment remains. Suppose you want to eat healthier. What happens if unhealthy food surrounds you? You'll rely on willpower, and willpower eventually weakens. Now imagine removing unhealthy choices entirely. Suddenly, discipline becomes easier. Suppose you want to read more. What happens if your phone sits beside you? Distraction remains constant. But what happens if your phone stays in another room and your book sits on your desk? The environment begins supporting your goals. This is one of the greatest secrets of habit formation. Make good habits obvious. Make bad habits invisible. Successful people understand that self-control is often less important than environmental design. They don't constantly resist temptation. They reduce exposure to temptation.
Think about a person trying to save money. They could fight the urge to spend every day, or they could automate their savings and remove the decision entirely. Which strategy is more effective? The one that requires less willpower. Because the less you rely on motivation, the more reliable your behavior becomes. Let's explore another powerful principle. Make good habits easy. Many people accidentally make positive habits difficult. They decide to exercise and immediately attempt 2-hour workouts. They decide to read and commit to 50 pages daily. They decide to meditate and expect perfect concentration. The brain responds with resistance. Why? Because difficult behaviors require more energy, and the brain naturally seeks efficiency. Suppose instead you committed to 1 push-up, 1 page, 1 minute. This sounds ridiculous until you understand the true purpose. The objective isn't immediate transformation. The objective is establishing identity. Remember what we learned in the previous chapter. Every repeated action becomes evidence of who you are. 1 push-up isn't about fitness, it's about becoming someone who exercises. 1 page isn't about knowledge, it's about becoming someone who reads. 1 minute isn't about productivity, it's about becoming someone who takes action. The hardest part of any habit is not the action itself, it's beginning. Once you begin, momentum often carries you forward. This is why small habits produce enormous results over time. Imagine an airplane leaving New York for Los Angeles. If the pilot changes the course by only a few degrees, the plane eventually arrives in an entirely different location. Small changes, massive consequences. Life operates according to the same principle. Improving by 1% each day seems insignificant, but compounded over years, those improvements become extraordinary. Likewise, small negative behaviors accumulate too. 1 missed workout isn't important, but repeated for years.
The consequences become substantial. 1 unnecessary expense seems harmless. Repeated thousands of times, the impact becomes enormous. This phenomenon is known as the compound effect, and it explains why habits are more important than goals. Goals determine direction. Habits determine progress. Suppose 2 people have identical goals. Why does one succeed while the other fails? The answer usually lies in their systems. Goals create intention. Systems create outcomes. Consider professional athletes. Every athlete wants to win. Every competitor wants success. What separates champions is not desire, it's daily behavior. It's the systems they follow repeatedly when nobody is watching. The same principle applies to every area of life. Financial success is often a result of financial habits. Health is often a result of health habits. Knowledge is often a result of learning habits. Relationships are often a result of communication habits. Your life today is largely the result of your habits yesterday, and your future life will largely be determined by the habits you build today. But there is another critical principle. Never miss twice. Everyone fails. Everyone loses momentum. Everyone breaks habits. The difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is not perfection, it's recovery. Suppose you miss 1 workout. Fine, don't miss the next one. Suppose you procrastinate for 1 day. Accept it, then begin again. Suppose you make a mistake. Learn from it, then continue. Failure is not what destroys habits. Abandonment destroys habits. Many people quit because they believe 1 mistake erased all progress. But progress is never destroyed by a single failure. Progress is destroyed by the belief that failure means you should stop trying. Think about learning to walk. Did you quit after falling? Of course not. Failure was expected. Growth required repetition. Personal development operates according to the same rules. You will fail. You will struggle. You will lose momentum. And none of those experiences determine your future. What determines your future is your willingness to begin again, again, and again, and again. Eventually, the repeated action becomes easier, then automatic, then part of who you are. At that moment, discipline transforms. It no longer feels like a burden. It becomes a lifestyle, a way of thinking, a way of living, a way of becoming. And once powerful habits begin shaping your life automatically, a new challenge emerges. Because having good habits means little if your attention is constantly under attack. In today's world, perhaps the most valuable skill of all is the ability to focus, and that is exactly where our journey leads next. Because in the next chapter, we will explore how to master attention, eliminate distraction, and reclaim control of your mind.
Chapter 6: Mastering Focus, Winning the Battle for Your Attention. There is a resource more valuable than money, more valuable than talent, more valuable than opportunity. It is the one resource every human being receives in exactly the same amount, and once it is spent, it can never be recovered. That resource is attention, not time, attention. Because time passes whether you use it well or not, but attention determines what your time becomes. Two people can be given the same 24 hours. One builds a business, one masters a skill, one transforms their health. The other remains exactly where they started. The difference is rarely intelligence. The difference is where they place their attention. In many ways, your life is simply the result of what you consistently pay attention to. If you give your attention to distractions, your life becomes fragmented. If you give your attention to growth, your life becomes meaningful. If you give your attention to fear, your world becomes smaller. If you give your attention to purpose, your world becomes larger. This truth has never been more important than it is today, because you are living in the most distracting period in human history. Every day, thousands of people compete for your attention. Companies spend billions of dollars studying how to keep you engaged. Applications are designed to be irresistible. Notifications are engineered to trigger emotional responses. Algorithms learn your habits, your preferences, your fears, and your desires. Your attention has become one of the world's most valuable commodities, and whether you realize it or not, there is a battle taking place every moment of every day, the battle for control of your mind. Imagine someone attempting to build a house during a hurricane. Every few minutes, powerful winds destroy part of their progress. No matter how hard they work, they struggle to move forward. This is how many people attempt to build their lives. They try to learn while constantly checking their phones. They try to work while surrounded by distractions. They try to create while consuming endless streams of information. And then they wonder why progress feels impossible. The truth is simple. You cannot build an extraordinary life with a distracted mind. Yet many people have become so accustomed to distraction that they no longer recognize it. Consider how often you switch your attention during a typical day. You begin reading an article, a notification appears, you check a message, then you open social media, then you remember another task, then you check your email, then you return to the original task, then another distraction appears. By the end of the day, your mind feels exhausted, not because you worked too hard, but because you focused too little. Every time you switch attention, your brain pays a cost. Researchers call this the switching cost. When you move from one task to another, your brain doesn't instantly reset. Part of your attention remains attached to the previous task. As a result, your concentration becomes fragmented, your efficiency decreases, your stress increases, and your performance suffers. This explains why many people feel busy while accomplishing very little. They mistake activity for productivity, but activity is not productivity. Movement is not progress. Being busy is not the same as being effective. True productivity requires something increasingly rare: deep focus. Deep focus is the ability to concentrate intensely on a single task for an extended period of time. It is the ability to ignore distractions, to resist impulses, to remain mentally present. And in today's world, deep focus has become a superpower. Think about the greatest achievements in human history, scientific discoveries, works of art, innovative companies, groundbreaking inventions. None were created through constant interruption. They were created through sustained concentration, through long periods of uninterrupted thought. This raises an important question. If focus is so valuable, why is it so difficult? The answer lies partly in how the brain responds to novelty. Human beings are naturally attracted to new information. For our ancestors, paying attention to new stimuli increased the chances of survival. A strange sound, an unfamiliar environment, an unexpected movement, all demanded attention. This tendency remains within us today. The problem is that modern technology exploits this ancient survival mechanism. Every notification represents novelty. Every video promises novelty. Every headline offers novelty. And novelty creates anticipation. The brain responds with curiosity. Curiosity becomes attention. Attention becomes habit. Eventually, distraction becomes automatic. You no longer consciously choose distraction. Distraction chooses you. This is why many people experience a strange phenomenon. They pick up their phone without intending to. They open applications automatically. They scroll without purpose. Minutes become hours. Hours become days. And years quietly disappear. This is not because they lack intelligence. It is because their attention has been trained. The encouraging news is that attention can also be retrained. Like a muscle, focus becomes stronger when exercised, and like a muscle, it becomes weaker when neglected. Imagine someone who has never exercised attempting to lift enormous weights. They would struggle, not because they are incapable, but because strength requires training. Focus operates according to the same principle. If you have spent years training your mind to seek constant stimulation, concentration will initially feel uncomfortable. You may sit down to work and experience restlessness. You may feel the urge to check your phone. You may become bored. You may feel anxious. This is normal. Your brain is adapting. The discomfort is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. One of the most powerful ways to strengthen focus is through deliberate periods of uninterrupted work. During these periods, eliminate distractions completely. No notifications, no social media, no unnecessary interruptions. Only one task. At first, this may feel impossible. Your mind will search for stimulation. It will create excuses. It will convince you that something else deserves your attention. Ignore these impulses. They are temporary. The longer you remain focused, the stronger your concentration becomes. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You enter a state often called flow. In this state, your attention becomes fully absorbed. Time seems to disappear. Effort feels natural. Performance improves dramatically. Many of humanity's greatest achievements were created in this state. But flow cannot exist in constant distraction. It requires space, silence, commitment, and patience. Another important principle of focus involves learning to tolerate boredom. This may sound strange. After all, why would anyone want to become comfortable with boredom? Because boredom is the gateway to discipline. Think about what happens when boredom appears. You reach for your phone, you open a browser, you search for stimulation.
Modern life has trained us to eliminate boredom immediately. But every time you escape boredom, you weaken your ability to focus. Highly disciplined people develop a different relationship with boredom. They accept it. They work through it. They understand that meaningful progress often exists on the other side of temporary discomfort. Consider athletes. They perform repetitive exercises thousands of times. Consider musicians. They practice scales repeatedly. Consider writers. They spend countless hours refining ideas. Mastery requires repetition. Repetition often creates boredom, and those who learn to tolerate boredom gain a tremendous advantage because they can continue long after others quit. This principle extends beyond work. It applies to every area of life. Can you sit quietly without reaching for stimulation? Can you walk without checking your phone? Can you think without requiring constant entertainment? Can you simply exist without distraction? If not, you may not have an attention problem. You may have an overstimulation problem. The solution is not more productivity techniques. The solution is learning to reclaim your mind. One practical strategy involves creating environments specifically designed for focus. Remember what we learned about habits. Environment shapes behavior. If your workspace contains distractions, distraction becomes inevitable. If your environment encourages focus, concentration becomes easier. Remove unnecessary devices, reduce visual clutter, create physical spaces associated with deep work. Train your brain to associate certain environments with concentration. Eventually, simply entering that environment will trigger focus automatically. Another strategy involves protecting your most valuable hours. Not all hours are equal. Some periods of the day naturally produce greater energy and concentration. Identify these periods, protect them. Do your most important work during your strongest mental hours. Do not waste peak attention on trivial activities, because attention, once spent, cannot be recovered. There is another hidden enemy of focus that deserves attention: fear. Many people distract themselves because concentration forces them to confront uncomfortable truths. When you stop distracting yourself, you begin thinking, you begin reflecting, you begin confronting your goals, your fears, your regrets, and your responsibilities. For some people, distraction becomes emotional avoidance. They remain busy because silence feels uncomfortable. But growth often requires silence. Transformation often requires reflection, and clarity often emerges only after distraction disappears. This is why moments of solitude can be so powerful. When external noise disappears, internal wisdom becomes easier to hear. You begin asking better questions. You begin noticing patterns. You begin understanding yourself more deeply. And self-understanding is one of the greatest forms of power, because once you understand yourself, you can direct yourself. Ultimately, focus is not about forcing your brain to concentrate. It is about deciding what deserves your attention. Every moment of your life represents a choice. What will you think about? What will you prioritize? What kind of future will you build? Your attention answers these questions long before your words do. Where your attention goes, your life follows. And if you can master your attention, you can master nearly every other area of your life. But even a focused mind faces moments of difficulty, moments of disappointment, moments of frustration, moments when emotions threaten to overpower logic. Because true self-discipline is not merely the ability to control actions, it is the ability to manage emotions. And that is where our journey leads next. In the next chapter, we will explore emotional discipline,
the hidden force behind resilience, self-control, and lasting success.
Final chapter: the promise you make to yourself. As we reach the end of this journey, there is one final truth about self-discipline that deserves to be remembered. Self-discipline is not about becoming someone else. It is not about becoming perfect. It is not about eliminating fear, avoiding failure, or living without struggle. Self-discipline is about learning to trust yourself. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored the hidden power of discipline, the psychology of habits, the battle against procrastination, the importance of identity, and the value of focus. But beneath all of these ideas lies a simple and profound principle. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the promises you keep to yourself. Every morning you make a promise. Every goal you set is a promise. Every dream you carry is a promise. And every action you take either strengthens that promise or weakens it. For many years, you may have believed that success belonged to other people, people with more talent, more intelligence, more confidence, more opportunity. But now you know a different truth. Success is rarely built through extraordinary moments. It is built through ordinary moments repeated consistently. The decision to wake up when you said you would. The decision to continue when motivation disappears. The decision to begin before you feel ready. The decision to try again after failure. These moments rarely attract attention. No one applauds them. No one celebrates them. Yet they are the moments that build a life. Perhaps there were times when you doubted yourself, times when you started and stopped, times you failed, times when you looked at the distance between who you were and who you wanted to become and wondered if change was truly possible. If so, remember this: your past behavior does not define your future identity. Your previous failures do not determine your future success, and the person you were yesterday does not have to be the person you become tomorrow. Transformation does not happen all at once. It happens one choice at a time, one habit at a time, one promise at a time. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. Imagine waking up as the person you've always hoped to become. A person who trusts themselves, a person who follows through, a person who acts with courage even when afraid, a person who chooses growth over comfort. That future version of yourself is not created by luck. That person is created by the decisions you make today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. There will still be difficult days. There will still be setbacks. There will still be moments when giving up feels easier than continuing. But remember what you've learned. Discipline is not the absence of difficulty. It is the decision to continue despite difficulty. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of fear. Success is not perfection. It is persistence. So when this audiobook ends, do not ask yourself whether you feel motivated. Ask yourself a better question. What is the next right action? Then take it. And after that, take the next one. And then the next. Because every extraordinary life is built exactly that way. Not through giant leaps, but through thousands of small steps taken with intention. One day you will look back and realize that the greatest victory was never the achievement itself. It was becoming the person capable of achieving it. And that journey begins and continues with a single decision: to keep your promise to yourself. Thank you for taking this journey. Now go build the life you know you are capable of creating.